computer. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. With us today are Denise Jess and Jim Denham from the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired to talk with us about accessibility. So I will turn it over to Denise and Jim will be sharing his screen.
Awesome. Thank you, Gail. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who are here with us today. And welcome to those of you who will join us later when you view this on YouTube. It is absolutely my honor to have the opportunity to share with you work that the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired is doing throughout the state, and then specifically to focus on creating accessible websites and social media and PDFs so that we can, as communities around the state, create welcome and inclusion and access to information for all of our constituents and residents. And today's focus will primarily be access for those of us who live with vision loss, ranging from full blindness to low vision. I'll talk more about that population in just a couple of minutes, and I want to just say a couple words about myself and then turn it over to my co-facilitator this morning, who will then turn it over to one of our new staff who is joining us today as an observer. So I am very pleased to have served as the executive director of the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired for the past 6 years. My anniversary is coming up on July 1st, and it's kind of amazing to me that it has been 6 years, because this is the work I feel like I have been called to do, to advocate for and create opportunities on behalf of people who live with vision loss. I am a lifer with vision loss. I was born legally blind, and I'll talk a little bit more about my particular vision loss when we're talking about vision loss in general later in the presentation. And I bring that experience as well as nonprofit leadership, running a small business for 22 years, and actually starting my career as a classroom teacher. So that idea of advocacy and education are really rooted in how I show up in this work. It's so awesome to be able to talk with you all, because I see you as lifelines to your communities in so many ways. You know, this week, I think, is a great example after we had, the very devastating storms come through the lower portion of the state, and time without electricity for many folks. You know, the critical work that municipalities do in sending safety information to residents and constituents, the important work you do on conveying information about voting, and all the municipal services that are available, our parks and our transportation networks. So you really are critical partners in the quality of life for the people in your community. So to have the opportunity to talk with you today and to support your work in creating greater inclusion and accessibility is really awesome. And I'm so grateful for Gail to do that reach out. So Jim, let me turn it to you so you can do an intro as well. And then if you would kindly pass it to Rachel, that would be great.
Sure. Good morning. I would like to echo, my name is Jim Denham. I am the Access Technology Specialist with the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. And I just want to echo what Denise just said, we really appreciate you guys taking the time to learn about accessibility and focus on accessibility and think about accessibility for all populations. Like Denise mentioned, we're going to be talking about individuals who are blind or visually impaired this morning, but it's really important to kind of think about all populations and make sure we're including everyone. So I am a resident of Fitchburg. I currently live in Fitchburg and work at the council in Madison. I grew up in Wisconsin and then left the state for about 20 years, and I'm now back here in Fitchburg, and my wife and I recently purchased a home in Fitchburg. And so it's a great community, and just the state of Wisconsin just has some wonderful communities. So really happy to be back here in Wisconsin. I am pretty much totally blind. I've got a little bit of light perception. If you can shine a light in my eye, I can tell if the light is on or off, but I have been blind since birth with a condition called Leber's congenital amaurosis, which basically just means destruction of the retina. So I'll be using this. We'll be using a screen reading software. We'll talk what that is in a little bit. But yeah, just like to thank all of you for your time this morning, and I will pass it to our newest staff member, Rachel Pavone. Rachel, if you're muted, I'm not sure if we can't hear you.
Rachel is muted.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Thank you.
Still learning the job and the technology. We're getting there. So I'm a new hire on with the Wisconsin Council of the Blind as a vision rehabilitation therapist. I started 2 weeks ago here, and I would also like to thank on behalf of you guys for allowing our council as a group to present. I am completely blind. I have retinitis pigmentosa, and I lost the rest of my vision due to cataract surgery when I was 18 years old. And I am originally from Michigan. I did all of my schooling in Michigan, and I graduated with my degree in vision rehab therapy at Western Michigan this April, so just recently. And I am excited to see what Jim is going to present on, and also excited to be in this new position. So thank you.
So vision rehabilitation, thanks, Rachel. Just for those of you who might not be familiar with the term, we teach folks the skills of blindness. So as you lose sight, there's the day-to-day living skills of cooking and medication management and hygiene and cleaning, self-care, that so many folks are used to doing visually. And so for those of us with low or no vision, knowing how to do those things tactily and auditorily is really, really critical. So Rachel is one of our staff who teaches those activities of daily living. Or will be teaching those. So Jim, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and launch the presentation.
Great.
Fantastic. And we can move past the first slide right away. There we go. So our mission, I want to take just a few minutes to talk with you about the council so that you know who we are. And part of that is my hope as you encounter folks in your community who may be experiencing vision loss, that you will consider inviting them to reach out to us to make those referrals, connect to our services directly or through us to get to the office for the blind and visually impaired, which is part of the Department of Health Services. So our mission at the council is to promote the dignity and empowerment of the people in Wisconsin who live with vision loss. And we really focus on dignity and empowerment because we come from a very strong belief that when people have the right tools and the right set of skills, and that we have policies in place and procedures in place in our communities, that the doors for folks with vision and loss have the possibility of opening and that we can live full and vibrant lives. So we come very much at our work from an asset-based perspective. And the values that guide our work are integrity, inclusivity, and uncompromising respect. And Jim, you can advance. We do our work through three primary pillars. One is advocacy, and the council was founded on the notion of doing advocacy work 70 years ago. This is our anniversary year. And our founders understood that policy and law really made a difference in the quality of life for people living with vision loss. And so it's our cornerstone, and I'm very proud to lead the council's advocacy work to this day and to continue to see it grow in its vibrancy and effectiveness. We do a great deal of education as well, kind of facing in two different directions. One direction is facing towards folks with vision loss and families to support people on their journey. As people lose vision, it's quite a journey to go from knowing oneself and how you operate in the world now, to the grieving journey of losing sight, to the acceptance journey. So we do work there, and also the education of the skills and tools that are necessary to live a full and vibrant life. And then we do education like we're doing today that is facing the more typically sighted or fully sighted community, to get information out about how we can create inclusive communities, how we can create authentic connection, and to help reduce stigma and bias. And then the last piece of the work that we do is vision services. And so I mentioned that, there's a whole skill set. So learning how to use access technology that is associated with computers and smartphones and tablets, learning how to use both high-end technology and very low-end technology or tools like tactile marking on a microwave to be able to do the activities that are necessary for thriving both at home and at work and in the community. And we have a small brick and mortar store and web presence as well, called the Sharper Vision Store, which sells a lot of the devices that folks are in, that folks are needing, anywhere from magnifiers to higher end digital magnifiers and closed caption televisions. You can visit us in our store at the corner of Williamson Street and Livingston Street in Madison. And if you are ever in Madison, I highly encourage you to come visit us, because to be able to get your hands on the devices and get a sense of them, I think is really powerful. And we often have folks who are like, wow, I could actually use this myself, even though I'm fully sighted. And then we have a vibrant web presence as well at wcblind.org, where folks can shop and also learn more about the services that we offer. Last thing I'll say about our vision services is that we distribute free white canes to any individual in the state of Wisconsin who has low vision or is fully blind. And we see the white canes as such an important tool for both navigation and independence, as well as identification. So learning how to use a white cane to navigate, to know where obstacles and barriers are, and where you can move with ease and fluidity, knowing how to safely cross streets. Learning really how to utilize that cane in addition to having it in your hands. And we want to make sure that cost is not a barrier for someone to get the cane into their hands. So Jim, you can go ahead and move to the next slide. We were founded in 1952. And since that time, we've been both governed by and led by people with vision loss. So our board is primarily made up of people living with blindness and low vision. And we have some fully sighted members as well, because we believe that collaboration and multiple lived experiences actually help us do our work better and more fully. And since our birth in 1952, all of our executive directors, with the exception of 2 of them, were folks who had some form of vision impairment. And I'm the first woman director who has vision loss. So I'm very proud to serve both as a woman, as an open lesbian, and as a person with vision loss for this important organization. And nearly half of our staff are also folks with vision loss. We know that employment is a significant barrier for people with vision loss. So living our truth and having folks who are blind and visually impaired, who are excellent staff members and colleagues, is part of how we live our mission. And we can advance. A little bit about the population of people in Wisconsin who are blind or visually impaired. I think oftentimes when you think about someone who is blind, you think about Jim, Rachel, and I, people who are lifers or, have been visually impaired a good portion of our lives. And that's true. We're actually a smaller number of people experiencing vision loss throughout the United States. Our most rapidly growing population are folks in their middle, working age years, and folks who are elders. And we're seeing that population rise considerably, both as people live longer, our populations increase, and oftentimes folks who are working age and older acquire and genetic disorders become start to play themselves out, like retinitis pigmentosa that Rachel described, but also aging eye diseases, macular degeneration, glaucoma, and neuropathy due to diabetes are significant. We see a higher number of folks who are poor or living in poverty who are visually impaired. And we also see a higher prevalence of women. And then certain eye conditions impact certain groups more than others. So glaucoma, for example, is higher in our Black and brown communities than it is in our among folks who are white. Macular degeneration is more prevalent in folks who are white and of Northern European heritage. Our potential for becoming disabled, losing sight, and having other disabilities increases as we age. So that by the time we are in our upper 70s and into our 80s, about 42% of all elders have some form of disability. Important to know, so many of the folks with vision loss are members of your community, but because of the significant stigma that still surrounds vision loss, many folks really struggle to come out and let neighbors, friends, and sometimes even family know that their vision is significantly changed. Jim, you can advance. I want to share with you briefly kind of an image that shows how vision loss impacts people, because I think this is really helpful when you're planning social media, when you're planning your web, even when you're interacting with folks out in the community. It certainly impacts your municipal clerks and your polling place workers when they are interacting with voters. So oftentimes when folks think of vision impairment, they think of folks who are fully blind. And certainly there are people who are fully blind who have no or very little light perception. Again, folks with full blindness are not the majority population. So there is a whole spectrum of vision loss. My vision loss isn't portrayed here, but I'll describe it for you. It's hypoplasia of the optic nerve, which in less fancy terms means that I have no light perception or color perception in my left eye at all. In my right eye, I have significant tunnel vision. I'm like looking through a paper towel tube. I don't have distance vision. So what you see at about 200 feet, I see at about 5 feet. I need text to be, if I'm actually reading physical text, I need it to be in about 24 to 36 point font in order to be able to see it and discern it. So the vision impairments that you'll see most commonly, or that are very common, are folks with macular degeneration, which is portrayed at the top of that triangle of images. And so for folks with macular degen or other central field loss, there's a spot Could be a little bit from cloudy to very dark in the central field of vision. And for folks with central field loss, reading print is very difficult, because you can imagine if you were reading along a line of text and then suddenly came to where your central scotoma interacts with the text, it would be a blank place on the page. Also, facial recognition is really challenging, because when you're looking straight at someone, their face is behind in that central scotoma. And depending on how somebody turns their head, they might be able to see you better. And so one day when you see them at the grocery store, they say hello to you by name. The next time they see you at the library, they seem to not know who you are. And oftentimes folks with central field vision loss get perceived as having memory loss, because it's like, oh, are they not remembering my name? Down on the bottom left, a scattered scotoma, so spots throughout the visual field, common with glaucoma and retinitis, or not retinitis pigmentosa, retinopathy due to diabetes. And then on the right-hand side, down in the bottom corner, is tunnel vision, common with retinitis pigmentosa, where the sides of the vision are more obscured, makes it more difficult for seeing what is on your left and your right. So navigation can become more challenging, and the field of vision is, slowly diminishes to maybe even a pinpoint or no vision at all if it's a progressive disease. So we can go ahead and advance, Jim. So I'm going to pause here. I wanted to set a context for you before we jump into why it matters to be really inclusive of the folks that bring all of this beautiful diversity to our communities. So Jim, if you want to take it from here, I'm going to hand the reins over to you.
Great. Thank you, Denise. I appreciate that. Why does it matter? Why is accessibility important? What we're really looking to do is we're really looking to empower people with vision loss to have equitable access. We want everybody to be equal, everybody to have the same access to things. And these are things like governmental services and critical information that impacts safety and just the ability to fully participate in the community and participate in public life. So, these are things that we want to make sure everyone has the access to that. Everybody has equal access to these things, because so much of what we do these days is on social media and on websites and, done electronically. We really want to make sure that individuals who are experiencing vision loss have access to that. So a really good example is during the COVID-19 pandemic. We're all kind of in lockdown, we're all in our houses, and then some things came out about, okay, some of the vaccines are becoming available. And those of us with vision loss, we really wanted to be able to sign up for these appointments just like everyone else, because then the commercials, sign up for an appointment. And so personally, I got online and tried to sign up for an appointment, only to find the website was not accessible. And it was really frustrating because, I wanted to sign up for an appointment. I wanted to get my time in to come in and get the vaccine just like everyone else. But I couldn't independently do that because the website wasn't accessible. And so it was, I had to get someone to assist me with it, which is, it's fine if you have someone. I happen to live with someone who's sighted and they were able to assist me, my wife. But, some people in our population, they live by themselves. And maybe, with the pandemic going on, maybe the neighbor doesn't feel comfortable stopping over, because they don't want to share that space. And so, they were left unable to get appointments, or maybe there was just, they tried to get them via phone and they just couldn't get an appointment via phone. So, having access to this information is really important. These services are really important. And I think what all of you do in the different municipalities around Wisconsin, and you to put, things like your meeting minutes out there. Well, people who are blind and visually impaired want to know what's going on with city councils, and they want to know what's happening with the different municipalities and what decisions are being made, because they may want to have some input on those decisions. The The city of Madison recently, are pretty much totally revising the Metro Transit system. Well, people who don't drive, we rely on Metro Transit quite a bit, and having input on what's going on and what's happening is really important. So those are just kind of two quick examples of, why this is important, why we need to have full access and just equal access for everyone.
Jim, before you move on, I want to include one other very recent example. One of our colleagues at the council has been quite ill, and her physician recommended that she go get a COVID test. And so she went on the COVID website to sign up for a testing, for a test time. And in addition to the transportation barrier, before she even got that far, she could not sign up for a test. She does live alone. And then, after hitting the barrier of not being able to sign up for a testing appointment, called me, and she and I problem solved, that she was going to need to call her doctor and insist on coming in for a clinic appointment to be able to get tested, because they didn't really want her to do that. But they needed to make that accommodation. So yeah, it continues to be very real and very alive.
Absolutely. So how do folks who are blind and visually impaired access technology? What is access technology? So, we talked at the beginning, there are different forms of access technology for people with other disabilities. There are, access technology products for people experiencing hearing loss and people with physical disabilities. But we're going to kind of focus here on technology for people who are blind or visually impaired. And there are really kind of two ways people can access this information. So individuals such as Denise, who have some usable vision, may rely on screen magnification. And this is going to, increase the size of the print on the screen, increase the size of pretty much everything on the screen, and makes it easier to see. For some individuals, that's really helpful. Making you increase that size, that they can see that. We go 3 or 4 times magnification. That really helps them read and access the information. Other individuals with other conditions, that may not be helpful. If other eye conditions, you can magnify all you want, but if they're, they lost their central vision, for example, that might be really difficult for them to see. So in those situations, we can change some colors, maybe changing the background color, changing the foreground color, changing the font, making things more contrast, making things stand out more, makes things easier to see as well. We can also, increase the size of the mouse pointer, because using the mouse pointer can be tricky sometimes. So that's what we call screen magnification. And then individuals such as myself, who really have no usable vision, you can make the print as big as you want, and I'm still not going to be able to see it. We use screen reading software. So this is synthetic speech that's going to read information verbally on the screen. And so we can listen to things like web pages, emails, Microsoft Word documents, spreadsheets. And we'll hear some examples of that in a little bit. But this is primarily how we're accessing information, is auditorily. So there are other ways of accessing, there's Braille and a couple other different ways, but really screen magnification and screen reading are the kind of the two big ways of accessing this information. And we'll talk more about these tools in a bit, but there are some tools that are built right into some of these operating systems that allow people to just walk up to a computer and start using this. This is kind of one of the cool things that's changed in the last 5 or 10 years is, when I first entered this field, if you wanted to get access to a computer, you had to install a piece of software and sometimes even attach a peripheral device to that computer. Now a lot of it's built right into the operating systems. So Windows, we have Narrator, which is a screen reader that's built in. We have Magnifier, which is a screen magnifying application that's built right into Windows. In Windows 11, they've actually changed it to accessibility settings. It used to be called ease of access in Windows 10. And now Microsoft is kind of making it a little bit more people to identify what these tools do, and they're calling it just accessibility settings. So if you look in your settings of your computer, you're going to see you can make your computer talk. You can make the print bigger, easier to see. On the Mac, we've got VoiceOver, which is the screen reader that's built into the Mac. We've got a magnifier that's built into the Mac as well. So these tools are really important. We also use, we're actually showing today a third-party solution called JAWS for Windows. Nothing to do with the movie, no sharks involved. But it actually stands for Job Access with Speech. It was a tool that was originally developed to help people get access to employment settings. So we'll demonstrate that in a little bit. But these are tools people can use to access information. And these are tools, because they're built on the operating systems, these are tools that you can use to test your websites, test your social media, and see if it's accessible. You're not going to have the same experience as someone who is low vision or totally blind accessing this information, but you can at least get an idea of some of the ways they might be experiencing some of these different things. So we have some certain guidelines that we use to ensure content is accessible. And these were guidelines that are developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, and they're called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And these are kind of just suggestions that you can use to make sure your content is accessible. These are primarily designed for websites, but they can also apply to social media. They also apply to documents to some senses as well. So you really, and these are really cross disability. These are things in these guidelines that pertain to all individuals who have disabilities accessing information. So, and there's kind of four main categories that we talk about when we talk about these guidelines. The first is perceivable. So can information on your webpage be perceived or accessed? You know, can someone access that information? If there's a picture, let's say you have a picture of someone standing at a podium. Well, the screen reader is not smart enough to see that picture and say, oh, this is a picture of someone standing at a podium. So you need to have what's called alt text, which is alternative text. So when the screen reader comes across that image, it reads that alt text and says, you know, person standing at podium delivering speech. Now, there is some things that have come on in the last year or two, what's called auto-generated alt text. And that's, you know, the computer is getting smart enough that it can actually look at a picture and see a picture may contain a podium, picture may contain, you know, a necktie if the person is wearing a necktie. So they can identify certain objects in that photo. But it may contain, you know, what it might call a necktie might actually be a tree branch. You know, you never quite know exactly what you're getting. So you sometimes get some idea of what's going on, but with auto-generated, it's still not good enough to get you an exact description of what's happening. So we always suggest, you know, add appropriate alt text. We'll talk about alt text a little bit more later on, but add alt text to your images and just really make it so that people can access that information. And that helps several different groups. Help people who are using screen readers. It also helps people who have cognitive disabilities. They might not recognize what's happening in the photo, and they can hover their mouse over and see what's going on. So operable. So as you'll see in a little bit, when I'm operating the computer, I'm simply using the keyboard. I'm actually not using a mouse, because when I'm using a screen reader, there's no way to know where that mouse pointer is located. I'm just kind of moving it all around the screen, and there's no way to know where that pointer is happening. So I'm using keyboard controls to operate my computer. And the great part about Windows is pretty much everything that can be done with a mouse can also be done with a keyboard. So we've got full keyboard access. But when we talk about certain websites, it's, you know, these websites sometimes are designed by people who don't think about the fact that, oh, someone might be using a keyboard, or someone might be using an alternative input device to access this information. So, you know, oh, you need to hover your mouse over this to make this work. Well, if I'm not able to use a mouse, I'm not able to hover my mouse over that. And so that's not going to work for me. So really designed to make sure you're operable. So really making sure that your site or your social media is operable, can be operated by people using different forms of input. Understandable. Can your content be understood by all the populations you're looking to serve? Is it understandable? Does it make sense? And is it easy to understand? And this a good example of this, we talk about, you know, are you using color? Well, if you're saying the new things that have been added to the document are highlighted in blue. Well, okay, I can't understand that. If I can't see color, I might not be able to understand that. So understandable is just making sure your content is accessible and understandable. And then the last one is robust. And robust is the fact that some of us who are using access technology might not be using the latest and greatest technology. Maybe our technology is not compatible with the latest web browser or the latest version of Windows. So, we want to make sure that your content can be used by some technology that might be a little bit older. Now, we're not saying you have to be compatible with, Windows 95 and other different things that might be, 10, 15 years old. But, a couple versions back or a couple years old, we want to make sure that those are compatible. Because some designers these days say, well, if you use the latest version of this and the latest version of this, it works great. Well, maybe my access technology is not compatible with that, so I'm not able to use that the latest version. So we want to make sure we're kind of technology independent. So we're
Jim,
going to
if
look
I
at some.
could, oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, if I could insert here too, I want to do a little advocacy piece. I think it's important to know, as Jim's talking about, some of our folks not having the latest technology available. Much of the access technology, and of course, the technology itself is not covered under many or any programs. So not covered under Medicaid, Medicare, or in private insurance. And there's limited funding in organizations like ours. And we can't get people computers, but we can maybe help with some of the other tools. So because we have a population that experiences higher levels of income insecurity, a lot of the technology can be older and often refurbished or passed on from other family members.
Very good points, Denise. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to just talk about some quick tips and tricks here for making content accessible, and then we'll actually demonstrate some of the technology, and I'll show you kind of how it works in action. So these are kind of just 10 tips for making your content accessible, and I'm not going to go through all of these because we would be here all morning, but I'm just going to just talk about a couple of them really quickly. Use headings to organize your content. So headings are major portions of your page and major markup sections of your page that you can use to make your content kind of flow and separate into logical sections. And individuals who are using access technology, we're not necessarily going to read your page from top to bottom. We want to kind of just browse the major sections of your page. And so it's really important to kind of use headings to kind of separate the logical sections of the page, and heading levels. I kind of put this as if you're browsing a recipe book. Recipe book has an introduction, that's probably a heading level 1. And then we've got different categories of the recipe book. We might have, appetizers, we might have entrees, we might have desserts, and those are probably heading level 2s. And then within those sections, we might have further breakdowns. Maybe within desserts, we've got chocolate desserts, we've got ice cream desserts, all sorts of different. Those might be heading level 3, and then the individual desserts might be heading level 4. So, you want to make sure those heading structures are logical, so you're not jumping right from appetizers to desserts and skipping over certain things. So you want to make sure your page has headings and you're using appropriate use of headings and heading structure. Alt text, we talked about using alt text to label your graphics. It's really important when you're writing alt text to kind of convey what's going on in the picture, the action of the picture. Now, this doesn't have to be a really long, 30, 40, 50 word description. It can be something just kind of quick and easy and really conveying what's happening in the picture. I always say, if you're looking at a picture in your screen and you're talking to someone on the phone, you're going to be telling them about that picture. What is it that you're going to tell a person on the phone? If we're looking at a photo, again, of someone speaking to an audience, and he's speaking in front of a crowd, person speaking to an audience at a podium, that's all you need to convey. It doesn't matter that the person might be wearing a blue sport coat and a red tie, unless you're talking about clothing choices for 2022, and hey, can you believe this person wears a red tie with a blue sport coat and fashion design, unless you're conveying that in your article. But if you're just talking about, hey, this is a picture of someone speaking to an audience, just convey the action of the photo, or someone riding a bicycle down the street. Okay, that's terrific. Does it really matter if the woman on the bicycle is wearing a purple hat? So just, you really want to convey what the action is, because if we're looking at that graphic, I don't want to sit and listen to a 40-word description. I want to know, hey, what's going on, and then I want to move on. So that alt text is really important. Writing good, concise alt text, it takes practice. It definitely takes practice. But we always say, don't let perfect get in the way of good. If you write alt text, you work on it, and you might be just, as long as it conveys some of the basic information, it takes some practice. Links having unique names is really important as well. Again, when we're using Access technology, a lot of people are quickly moving through page content. We're not necessarily wanting to read the entire text of your page. Maybe we just know, hey, there's a link on this page that we want to access, and there's a link we want to get to. So, we actually can access technology to give us a list of links on a page. And if all that link text is click here, click here, click here, I have no idea where that link's going to take me. But if it's, click here to read about our history, or click here to read about the latest, city council meeting minutes, that tells me exactly what's going to happen if I access that link. So it's really important to have your links have unique names to identify where that link is going to take the individual if they do activate that link. And then we talked about this briefly earlier. Use color with care. Some people have documents, they'll highlight certain things with color. And just, if you're using color, that's fine. For a form example, a lot of times people use forms and say, the required fields are in red or in blue. That's fine. If you want to do that, that's no problem. But also indicate them textually as well. A common practice is to use a star or use the word required on the field. So first name required, or first name star. And that kind of indicates, hey, this field is required. And you can even put, fields that are required are indicated in red and also have a star. So it's a really common, identify that people have multiple ways of accessing that content. So you can, don't be afraid to use color. Color is very important and absolutely is necessary. But if you're conveying information with just color, make sure you're conveying the information with other forms as well. And then again, make sure your content is accessible with a keyboard. And we'll send you a full, the slideshow. We'll provide it to you later on, so you have a full list of these tips. So what I'm going to do now here is I'm going to go away from the spreadsheet real quick, or from the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to actually show you what how Screen Reader works. So I'm going to first of all turn my speech back on.
Full speech.
Okay. This is the synthetic voice that I normally use, and it's at a pretty quick rate right now. So I'm going to
Not selected. Selected.
switch to a voice that's a little easier to understand.
Select the voice and Zoe Vocalizer expand.
Lost focus. Windows D. Folder.
Does that sound coming through okay?
Yep, sounds good.
Good. And we'll also,
Not selected.
we'll also turn on.
Space. B. Braille and text viewer. Enabling the text viewer.
Okay, so I turn on what's called a text viewer. So
Not selected.
so you're going to see on screen
Not selected.
what my
Selected.
screen reader is saying. Okay, what's going on here?
Windows D. Ready. Windows D. Folder view list view. Recycle bin. 1 of 9.
Okay, so I'm on my desktop right now, and I'm just, as I move around my desktop, it's going to be speaking to me what's going on.
Google Chrome. 2 of 19. FS Reader 3.0. 3 of 19.
Okay, so this
Not selected.
so this
Select.
screen reader is reading those icons to me as I move around, and reading that information to me as I move through the desktop. So it's verbally indicating what's going on, and I can just use the keyboard, use the arrow keys to move to different things. So this works on, obviously the desktop. It works if I was in a word processing document. It works if I'm reading my email. I can just arrow down through an email. I'll go ahead and show the document real quick.
PowerPoint meeting controls. Class documents. Class document. Home. T. Toolbar. View modes. Items view multi. Menu. Escape. Leaving menus. FS Reader 3.0. L give 0. L. FS Reader. Not select. Leaving menus. PowerPoint slide. Class documents. Class. L give 0. Not select.
Okay, screen reader's not playing nice this morning. My technology issues are.
Not selected 09. Leaving menus. PowerPoint. Escape. Class documents. Class. Menu. Escape. 2022. End. Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. Enter.
Okay, so we'll open up a website real quick here.
Blank. Page has 3 regions, 19 headings and 61 links.
Okay, so you heard the page here, to kind of give a little description of the page, how big the page is, how many headings it has, how many links it has, and that kind of gives me an idea of the size of the page. And I can move through that page and read through it just line by line if I want to.
List of 2 items. Toggle high, toggle font size, toggle button, toggle high contrast, toggle button.
Okay, so this is some controls we actually have built into our page that our web designer has put here to make it easier for people who are not using Access technology to access this content. So this first one is toggle high contrast. So if we turn this on,
Space, home dash toggle font, toggle high contrast, toggle button pressed.
okay, so it turns the page in more of a high contrast mode to make it easier to see. So if people are coming to our website and, hey, I've heard about that Council of the Blind and I want to, read more about them on their website, but I'm not using any forms of Access technology, or maybe I don't know about Access technology, I can toggle this control and make the page easier to see and easier to access their content.
Space,
Um,
toggle font size, toggle
You can
button.
also toggle the font size,
Space, toggle font size, toggle button pressed.
okay? And we can make that font size a little bit bigger and easier to see as well.
Toggle
So these
space,
are tools
toggle.
that our web designer helped us build right into our web page to make the page easier to see and easier to access. So we talked about headings earlier. If I want to move through the page by headings, I'm just going to hit a key here. I'm going to hit the letter H on my keyboard.
Welcome to Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, heading level 1.
Okay, so it takes us to heading level 1, which is welcome. I hit H again.
Mission heading level 2.
I hit our mission. So I want to read our mission. So I'm just going to use the down arrow key from here to move to our mission.
For much of our history, the council has awarded scholarships to incoming and heading level 3 link.
That's
Congratulations.
not our mission. Why is it?
Latest news heading vision serve education advocate mission heading to promote the dignity and empowerment of the people of Wisconsin who live with vision loss through advocacy, education, and vision services.
Okay, so it's reading our mission statement. So I can arrow down through here and read different things and move through the page in a couple different ways. And if there's a form, I could fill out a form and access that. So this is obviously our council page, and it works really well because we've designed it to be fully accessible and fully usable. And we're able to access this information and move through it and get to information what we need really quickly. I can find specific strings of text on the page. I'm looking for something specific. I can tell my screen reader to find a specific string of text on the current page, and I can access that and move through the page. So let's take a look at a page that might not be so accessible or so usable. I'm going to just show you how that works. And I'm going to pick on one of the local TV stations. My apologies if any of you or your family or friends work for local TV stations, but some of the local TV stations, they put up content as quickly as they can, and they don't always necessarily think about accessibility. Sometimes they do, but sometimes it's not the most accessible stuff in the world. And it's always changing. So this is always I don't know what they posted in the last hour. So we'll go ahead and pull up a page here and just see what happens.
Control L, address and NBC 15 period COM, enter.
This is
Blank.
a local NBC affiliate, and we'll see what's going on their page today.
Page has 2 frames, 4 regions, 51 headings and 154 links.
Okay.
WMTV vertical same page link award open wellness essential heading level 1. Heading level 1 wellness essential. Heading level 1 get your heart pumping.
Okay, so we're able to read through the notes and stories here, but for that.
Gray/3GVG5KKV6 Rignanpo 2 Zayak Mhu link graphic.
I have no idea what that is.
Nope, I don't either.
So that's a graphic that they have on their page. If I move around.
Link local. Unlabeled graphic gray/link 1 person has died after a pickup truck rolled into oncoming lanes along I-39 in Columbia Company.
Okay, so there's a Columbia County. So there is a graphic associated, that right next to that news story. I don't know for sure if that graphic has anything to do with that news story or not, or if that's a graphics for something else. So when these graphics are not labeled, I have no idea what's going on there and what's happening. So that's why it's really important to have those graphics and to be able to get to those different things. Let's do a links list here and see what we get with a links list.
Links list gray/local 13. The 2022 Madison Area Parade of Homes features homes in Arboretum Village in
Okay, so I'm getting links here.
2022 Madison Area C. Crime 33 of 161. C. Contests and promotions 55 of 106.
Okay, so the links are pretty good today. This varies by day, but sometimes you get links that are pretty non-specific, but sometimes they make their links pretty specific. So it really varies by day. So
Escape.
we're not doing too bad today, but we do have definitely some unlabeled.
Gray/3GV. The 2020 A Nice Weekend Forecast. Link graphic.
Okay, so there again, the alt text is a nice weekend forecast. So that's example of a graphic that has alt text. That's great. But what is the nice weekend forecast? What is that? That's showing a picture of, I'm assuming a picture of sunshine, a picture of a person walking in a sunny day. So, the graphic, the alt text is a nice weekend forecast. That really doesn't communicate what's going on in the image. And I have no idea of knowing what's going on in that picture. So if they say, person walking in the sunshine, or sun shining on the city of Madison, on the Capitol, or something like that, I would kind of have a better idea of what's happening with that alt text and kind of know what's going on. So that's just really important of writing that proper alt text and kind of communicating what's happening. So I do have up here.
Alt F4. Search tabs button. Escape. FS Reader 3.2000. Meeting control. V. Class documents. Class doc home. File. FS 2020. 2022 website accessibility. Class documents. Class League of Zero.
There you
2000
go.
browsing with low vision. 2022 web. Chop Sister L. Titanic. Chop Sister Bay. 4 of 6. Browsing with low L. FS Reader 3.
Okay, my technology is not functioning properly here today.
League of Zero. League of Zero. FS Reader 3.
Okay.
FS Reader 3.0. Windows D.
Definitely
Folder view
playing
list
havoc
view.
this morning, but I have taken a look at
Not selected. Select.
your
not-
League of Municipalities website, and it seems to work fairly well. You've got some nice heading structure there, and able to move through the page. So it looks like things are
Not selected. Selected. Not select.
things are looking pretty good. So
Not selected.
I would-
Not.
you made some positive things on your website. And we're always happy to take a look at a website. If you have a website you'd like us to take a quick look at, the council staff is
Not
always
selected. Selected.
okay. Jaws, you need to shut up. I was using the speech to be quiet.
Space. Speech on demand.
Can be important as well. So we're always happy to take a quick look at a website and give you a quick overview of, hey, is this page accessible? Is this page not accessible? And we kind of give people as kind of a free 15 minutes. Look at your page, browse like a page or two, maybe a form, whatever, and see if it's accessible. See if we see any major barriers. And we can send you a quick email, say, yeah, this looks good, or maybe you've got some problems here, you've got some problems here. We can give a kind of a quick overview. There are companies that will give a full website audit. So if that's something you're interested in, having somebody look at the detailed pages of your website, they will do that obviously for a fee, because it takes them hours and hours to go through every page in your site, and to they're really comparing it against those WCAG guidelines, and saying, yeah, your page meets this, your page doesn't meet here. Here's something you need to change. And that's a really detailed, in-depth look at your website to say, what's accessible and what's not accessible. So like I say, the council, we can give a quick look, just kind of a quick, 15 minutes. Hey, this looks good. And that's something we do, for free of charge. Just a quick, hey, yeah, this looks great. Or now there's some issues here. And we might say, if we see some issues, we might say, hey, you really need to do a full website audit. Here's some companies that you can do to do that. And that's gonna, they're gonna look at every single part of your page, and they're gonna test every single thing with various forms of access technology, both screen magnification, screen reading, and really compare it against those WCAG guidelines and make sure it's fully accessible and fully usable. So before we go on, is there any questions? Anybody have any
Jim,
comments?
take a look at our website. So I'm glad. This is Gail. Glad that it at least was organized correctly. We do have many PDFs, being a lot of information, and I know you'll probably get to that, but thank you so much for the information so far.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to help. Yeah. So PDF documents are a bit of an interesting challenge, because it really depends upon what tool is used to create the PDF document. There's so many tools out there used to create PDF documents. And reading PDF documents sometimes works really well. Sometimes it's not. Really, the PDF needs to be tagged is the important part, and tagged for accessibility. And that's basically telling the access technology what order this should be read, because a lot of PDFs have columns and text boxes and lots of different things. And without the information, the access technology doesn't know, should I read this straight across? Should I read just down the first column? Where should I read here? And you can get information that's really disorganized and really hard to read. You also need to make sure the PDF actually contains actual text, actual editable text, because sometimes PDFs are simply just a picture of text. A lot of restaurants will do this. They'll go to their copy machine and take their menu and put their menu on the copy machine and take a picture of it, or sometimes even use their phone. I've seen it the other day where somebody actually use their phone to take a picture of their menu and post that online. Well, my screen reader gets to that and says, "Hey, so this is a graphic." Oh, okay, but I can't eat graphics for lunch. So I want to know what's on the menu. I have to have actual readable text. So when you're posting a PDF, it's really important that PDF has editable text that can be accessed and can be read. And then once the text is editable, making sure it's properly tagged so the access technology knows what reading order that can be read in. So like I say, there are a number of different tools that can be used to create PDF documents. And PDFs get really complex because we talk about PDF forms and we talk about other different things. It gets really, really complicated in lots of different things, but there are some great resources out there. And there's also some accessibility checkers built into some of these tools. Some of these tools, once you create a PDF, you can hit, check for accessibility or accessibility checker. And it will actually go through and look and say, hey, might be a problem. Again, it's an automated test, so it's not perfect, but it might give you a little bit of information to say, this might be an issue. Or, hey, there's a graphic here. This graphic doesn't have any alt text, or this part of your document doesn't have proper tags. So it might give you some basic information to start working on making your document more accessible. It's not going to be the same as a person reading through it and saying, hey, this is good, or this has got issues. But it's an automated testing, which is definitely a start. So let's see if we go back to your slide here, Mike.
Full speech. Class document 2022 website accessibility.pptx-PowerPoint. Ready. F5. 2000. Slide notes. PowerPoint slideshow - 2000.
Okay.
Slide 2.
Let's advance our slides here.
Slide 8. Slide 10. 2000. Slide notes. Slide notes. Ready. Slide 11.
Okay, so this slide we're talking about, this is something you can actually check for accessibility. And this is kind of a nice thing because these tools are built into the operating systems. You can actually check the accessibility yourself. So we talked about narrator on a computer. Control Windows Enter will actually start narrator. So if you want to really impress your kids, you can go home and make your Windows computer start talking. You Control Windows Enter, computer will start talking, and also Control Windows Enter turns it off as well. It's really important to know how to turn it off, because otherwise your computer just gets really babbly, and it's hard to know what's going on. But so that's something, a tool that if you're using Windows 10 or Windows 11, you can bring up and just check. Command F5 on a Mac, you bring up VoiceOver, and your computer will start to talk, and you can start to navigate and try these different things. Now, all these features have different keystrokes you're going to use to access the information. So we don't expect you to become experts at learning how to use narrator or learn how to use VoiceOver. But this might give you the basics of if I touch this graphic, is it going to read the alt text that I put here? I think I put alt text to it, and I'm going to kind of verify that. So you can use this to kind of verify some of those different things. Also, the mobile operating systems have accessibility features in them as well. So iPhone has a magnifier, has VoiceOver built in, a number of different accessibility tools. I use the same iPhone that you would use. I'll go to the Apple Store and buy an iPhone. The only difference is I enable a feature called VoiceOver, which allows me to hear what's going on the screen and navigate and move around that phone and to know what's happening verbally. So kind of a nice thing that I've used the same device as everyone else, even though I'm not able to see it. It's not a specialized device that I have to use just because I'm low vision or blind. This is a tool that I can use just mainstream access, and it's just out there. Which a good example of that is my sister, who is fully sighted. She's a Mac user, and she's always, her email is always getting messed up. I don't know what she does exactly, but she always messes up her email on her Mac. And so she knows her brother's a techie. And so whenever I come over, it's, hey, can you fix my computer for me? And yeah, I can do it. I can fix your email once again. So I go to her computer and I hit Command F5, it comes up talking, and I use VoiceOver to work on her email and get things straightened away again. And then once I'm done, I hit Command F5, turn VoiceOver off, and she just uses her computer normally and says, thanks to me for fixing her email for the 4th time. So on iPhone, we've got tools. On Android, there's something called TalkBack, which is a screen reader. So all the major platforms these days have these accessibility features kind of built in and are able to access these tools. So this has kind of become a trend in the last 5-10 years that the mainstream companies are starting to recognize that these tools are really important, and lots of people are starting to need these tools. And these tools are really important to access information, and so just build them right into the operating system. Microsoft, as I mentioned, in Windows 11, they've actually called them accessibility features to really highlight the importance of them. And there's been some great articles in mainstream publications recently, talking about these features are out there, letting people know that these are there, because maybe someone who is starting to lose their vision can learn about a magnifier or changing some of the text colors and make it easier to see. So we want to make sure that this technology is really out there and available for everyone who wants to use it and can need to use it.
Hey, Jim, I just want to do a tech check or a time check. We're at about 11:15.
Okay.
2020.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Denise, to talk about kind of our invitation to you.
Sure. So one of the things I know we wanted to touch base on is, and I'll do that before we do the invitation, is social media, because I know that many
Yes.
of our municipalities make significant use of it, and which I, as a social media user, I really appreciate. So a lot of the principles that Jim has talked about apply in the social media world as well. I think many of the apps like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn interface really well with the built-in accessibility features on the phone or the tablet or the computer. The thing that needs to be attended to when posting is to include the alt tags on the images, particularly if they are images that convey information. And depending on what scheduler you are using, you may be able to, if you're using Hootsuite or other scheduling tools, you may be able to add the alt tags, but they may not stick. So you'll need to check to make sure that they stuck. It's still a little bit of a funky interface for the developer of social media to make sure that those posts are fully accessible. So, try a few with putting the alt tags in on your images. Check using the tools that Jim has shared with you to see if your alt tags actually stuck. And if not, you'll need to hand enter them. A couple different things to think about with social media is that some of your users will be using screen reader technologies like Rachel, Jim, and I use. Others will not, but they still can't see your images. So it is really awesome to also write the image description right into your text of the post. And could put it in parentheses or just say image description, and that usually goes below your hashtags. And to then describe what the graphic or the image is sharing with the same language that you would use for the alt text. That way, anyone who's not using a screen reader can still access the image and know what's going on. The other thing that you're doing when you add the image description right into the post body is you are conveying a value of inclusivity. So what you're saying to all of your readers is this information is important. And we want to include the image description, and it becomes contagious. So we include at the council image descriptions both on the alt tags and also in the body of the text with everything that we post. And I do that personally as well on all my social media. And pretty soon I'm starting to see the people in my friends network including image descriptions in their posts, and then their friends and their friends. So it's a good contagion to be demoing the use of image description. What happens for me as a social media user is when I see that someone has included me and included the image description, I have more trust in that entity. I feel like, yeah, they care about me as an individual and my population. And in times where I'm actually making purchasing decisions, I may make a purchasing decision based on how inclusive a particular vendor was in including the image description. I'm a big knitter. And so when I come across a yarn designer or yarn dyer who includes an image description of their yarn, I tag them for a future purchase because I'm more likely to do that than someone who didn't include it. The city sites that I follow that have better image descriptions than others, I'm more likely to seek them for information rather than other ones, because I know that I can get the information that I need. So, please, build both into the text itself and into the alt tag, those image descriptions. So our invitation to you is to check your website for accessibility, using a lot of the tools that Jim shared. And there are easy plugins that you can add, so that changing the contrast toggle and the text size toggle are very simple plugins to add. And because they're plugins, once you add them, they don't break the whole site. So oftentimes it is more difficult to retrofit a site that doesn't have accessibility built into it, because if you make one thing accessible, then maybe you break 3 other things. So when you are adding new pages, when you are doing a revamp of your site, that is critical time to be building for accessibility. And to do that, build right along with the build of everything else, so that it is truly fluid and right in there. If you're working with in-house shop, make sure that they really know how to build for accessibility. And if you're contracting with someone, for us, that's one of the questions that we use in our screening of who we contract with. And we ask them for examples of their accessible design, and we test to make sure that they're really worth their salt, that they're doing what they say they can actually do. Make a plan for updates as needed. We check our website regularly to make sure that nothing has broken, and when it does break, we fix it immediately. When we're adding a new page, we're building for accessibility. So kind of, if you're doing a regular website check on other things, build that accessibility check right into your checklist, and set a target date for moving to accessibility on your social media, and maybe a target channel. So if your majority content is going out on Facebook, then Facebook is a great place to start, because that's where your audience is. If your majority audience is on TikTok, which I hardly doubt it would be, but if it is, then then start there. Though TikTok is a very difficult platform for accessibility, and set a target date for that, and then do a launch, and maybe even do a post or two describing what you're doing and why you're doing it, and how it creates greater inclusivity for all members of your community. Yeah, so I think those are some of the big invitations to all of you. And Jim, when you're ready, you can advance the slide.
Yeah, the other thing I would add to that real quick is, is be proactive with this. if you had infrastructure that was kind of aging and needs some repairs and need some changes and need something like that, you wouldn't wait until somebody complains about it before you fixed it. So it's the same thing with, your social media and your websites and your documents.
Mhm.
Don't wait until you get a complaint. Be proactive about this kind of stuff. We really encourage you to think about this and to make it, more inclusive, because that's really including everyone. If somebody says, oh, I can now access this. This is great. I really appreciate now that I can access, the city's information on this, or, um, recycling or trash pickup and different things. Actually a really good example, because I have not checked recently, but many of the city, the trash pickup, they use color codes to indicate, which days trash is going to be picked up, which days recycling is going to be picked up. And as a screen reader user, that's really difficult to access. So, those kind of things, be proactive with those kind of things, and trying to make them accessible. And if I, go to a city's website and I say, oh, they've made it accessible, that's really great. I'm going to think a lot more of what that city government is doing. So go to the next
I
slide here.
imagine that many of you
Heading
use Legistar as well for your city documents, official ones from meetings. I know City of Madison does, City of La Crosse does. Legistar is a bear, and so I'm just going to say that out loud. Probably a bear for everybody, but it's definitely a bear for those of us who are users of access technology. So I serve on the city's transportation commission here, and we have been continuing to be in conversation about how to make Legistar more accessible, so that we create an open door to our constituents to be able to access that form of city governments, the meetings and city council meetings and commission meetings. So we will pause here with the invitation for comments and questions. Mine and Jim's contact information is here, and we would love for you to reach out to us. We'll send this PowerPoint. Jim mentioned that earlier. I want to revisit that. We'll send it to Gail this afternoon. And then Gail, if you would be so kind as to distribute it to the folks who are on this call, or however your distribution network runs, that would be awesome. And let's see what questions and comments are living out there for folks. No need to use the raise hand feature on your Zoom, because it does not give us audio feedback, or at least it doesn't for me. So just go ahead and unmute and raise your question or comment.
Thanks, Denise and Jim. We'll take questions if anyone has them.
This is Brittany in Kakana. I have gotten contacted by multiple vendors, like third-party vendors, I guess, that say that they work on, accessibility. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations as to like good companies like to work with to ensure accessibility on our websites?
Yeah, so Jim, we have a list of trusted vendors. Right now there's a large market, and municipalities, I think, are getting hit hard from folks that are trying to make a buck. And some of those folks are going to be very credible, and some of them are going to do the bare minimum. So, unfortunately, with the promise of the ADA and even the website accessibility guidelines, they are looking at kind of the lowest bar and not the most inclusive bar. So some of these companies that are putting their shingle out will tell you, yes, your website is accessible because they're using the lowest bar. But then when we get into actually using them, this just happened recently. We are working with a new payroll vendor, and the company was so happy that they could work with us because their site had been tested and it was seen to be accessible. And so Jim and I got into it, and the very easy pages, like how to view your pay stub, all of that was very accessible. But then when you went into how to enter your data, hours worked and all of that, it was all mouse driven and it was inaccessible. So they had passed the the minimum guidelines, but really was it usable? No. So Jim, if we can include when we send out the PowerPoint, the list of trusted vendors that we have, that would be great. And then Gail can circulate that.
Absolutely. We've got 2 or 3 vendors that we know, we kind of recommend and we use. And, you know, a good question I always ask vendors is, can you recommend somebody who has a disability who can verify your work, who can talk about the work that you've done, and someone who's actually using access technology? And some of them can. Someone say, well, yeah, you can speak to, you know, Joe Smith, who uses screen magnification, is really happy with some of the work that we've done. And some of them are like, well, no, we put this out here, but we've never had anybody actually with a disability actually try and use this stuff. And we just think it's accessible because, you know, and there's also, I will say this, there's also usability versus accessibility.
Yes.
Usability is really important as well. Making sure your site is usable as well as accessible. And that's something else that these companies, that the reputable ones really look for as well. A good example is, I was working with a developer a couple years ago, and he said, can you look at this web page? And I said, sure, I'm happy to take a look at the web page you put up. And he had a web page that had a lot of graphics on it that were used for decoration. And these decorative graphics were just little blue circles. And so on the web page, I was reading down through, it says graphic blue circle, graphic blue circle, graphic blue circle, graphic, and it was probably, you know, a couple thousand of these little decorative graphics on the page. And digging through that to try and find the information on the page was like literally trying to find a half a needle in a haystack, let alone a needle in a haystack. It was like a half a needle in a haystack. And I went to him, I said, well, there's a big problem here. Well, he said, I followed the guidelines. I've labeled all my graphics. Okay, yeah, that's great. But the graphics, these are decorative graphics. They don't convey any information to people. There's no need to have these graphics labeled. And there's actually a solution for that. You can actually label a graphic as decorative in your code, and then these access technology will actually ignore it. So, you know, making sure, and there's other things as well, but making sure that sites are usable as well as accessible is really important as well. And so that a lot of these vendors will say, okay, you know, your website maybe meets the minimum accessibility, but it's really not usable. We can help you make the website more usable as well. And not just people with disabilities, just for everyone as well. You can have, you know, do some other different things to make the website more usable as well. So we can certainly include that list when we send out the PowerPoint later on.
One last thing I'll say about the vendors who, you know, solicit your business, if they're taking the tack of, are you in compliance, and they're using the scare tactics to get your attention, I would be very nervous about engaging further with them, because in most instances, they're using kind of that bare minimum so that you pass a compliance complaint. But they're not, you know, the bar may not be very high. So that often is flag language, because those emails come across my desk as well, as executive director of an agency. And I find them relatively amusing, because I was like, yeah, no. So yeah, please use the list and reach out to us if you need, you know, any further recommendations. Thank you. That was a great question.
It was a really good question. And we're going to stop our recording now. But before we do that, Denise and Jim and Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today. The League of Wisconsin Municipalities prioritizes accessibility and diversity and inclusion, and this is part of that. We also really believe in our democracy and want to make democracy available to everyone as we can. So I'm going to stop recording now. And thank you again.